In 1966, two tragic events happened in Nigeria in quick succession, leading to one of the bloodiest fratricidal conflicts in modern Africa. In this video, former military head of state General Ibrahim Babangida explains all the dynamics that led to the July counter-coup in Nigeria. He also shed light on how many military officers and civilians were murdered in revenge for the January coup. But what was his own role in all of this? We'll find out all this in this video. Welcome to this edition of Hispo Media. My name is Gabriel Adidia, and I encourage you to take a moment to like this video and please subscribe to Hispo Media if you have not done so already. Without much ado, let's get to it. In January 1966, just days after the coup, Babangida was sent for a 4-month young officer's course on Saladin armored cars and gunnery at the Royal Armoured Centre in Bovington, Dorset, in the United Kingdom. When he returned to his reconnaissance unit in Kaduna in late April or early May 1966, the tension in the air arising from the 15 January coup was palpable. According to IBB in his book, A Journey in Service, an autobiography, the tension in the barracks was so palpable that you could touch it. It was clear that northern officers were spoiling for a fight to retaliate against the killings of January 15. The tension was compounded by the fact that there was a well-organized campaign to brand us, the so-called northern officers, as cowards for failing to revenge the killing of the Prime Minister, the Sardauna, and other northern officers who lost their lives. Meanwhile, as is always the case in situations of this nature, rumor and conspiracy theories began to flourish. There were rumors that officers of Igbo extraction were planning a second coup to kill more northern officers. Unfortunately, in the absence of an official federal government announcement about the fate of the soldiers killed during the January coup, rumors were rife as to whether they were dead or alive. For instance, IBB said, there was a story of a riot that broke out at the 2nd Brigade headquarters in Lagos when an attempt was made to remove Brigadier Mai Malari's nameplate because many low-ranking officers believed that Mai Malari was so invulnerable that he could not have died, and that since he was still alive, any attempt to remove his nameplate was a continuation of the plot against northern officers. There was also a rumor of a plan to swap the 1st and the 4th battalions and to rotate the military governors of the different regions. These rumors were amplified by stories of some Igbos relishing the January killings. Contrary to a promise given after the coup was aborted that the plotters would be tried, none was ever brought to trial, although some were detained. According to Ibrahim Babangida, on the contrary, a few of the coup plotters were promoted. This confirmed rumors that an Igbo domination of national affairs was in the works. He continued, meanwhile, the role of disgruntled northern civilian propagandists and politicians picked up more steam. They deployed a combination of incitement and swelling rumors as psychological warfare to get northern soldiers to retaliate for the killings of January 15. Many civilian leaders kept hammering that we were cowards for not avenging the deaths of our leaders. Finally, Babangida blames what happened next, unfortunately, on some of the decisions of the central government in Lagos. For instance, IBB said, in late May, the General Aguiyi-Ironsi-led federal government was convinced that the best way to unify the country was to issue the Unification Decree No. 34 of 1966, abolishing and replacing the regions with a group of 35 provinces. That decree also unified the civil services. Decree 34 was a significant disadvantage to northern Nigeria considering its inadequacy in human resources. This further fueled the fears of a southern domination of northern Nigeria and subsequently the entire country. Whether these fears of power domination were true or not, it was clear from sequence of events that something was about to give. Unfortunately, military discipline during this period collapsed. Particularly, non-commissioned officers NCO of northern Nigeria extraction became unmanageable. Many of them refused to take orders from their superiors. and in an army where most of the infantry were northerners, that constituted a real problem. Suddenly, there was a rush of mutinies in different army formations in the country. For instance, at the 4th Battalion in Ibadan, northern officers refused to take orders from Major M.O. Ezefili, who as second in command at the battalion replaced Lieutenant Colonel Abogo Lagema. Lagema was murdered in Lagos in the January 1966 coup. And even after another northern chief officer, Major Joe Akahan, replaced Ezefili, the northern officers remained restive. Similar incidents played out in other parts of the country. IBB said, by now, rumors of an imminent upheaval were so widespread that you knew it was a question of time before we had a disastrous national crisis. Not long after, the wheels came off. On July 28, 1966, things came to a head, and what has come to be known as the counter-coup of 1966 in Nigerian military history began. IBB said, the commanding officer of the Abeokuta garrison, Lieutenant Colonel Gabriel Okonweze, called a meeting of the rank and file of the garrison to douse the rumors of another coup. Unfortunately, agitated and aggrieved junior northern officers who erroneously believed that the meeting was convened to complete the terrible killings begun during the January coup by Igbo officers, burst into the forum, instantly killing Lieutenant Colonel Okonweze and the commander of the Re Squadron, Major John Obieno. While the killings were ongoing, Lieutenant Colonel A.L. O'Rourke, who drove in from town and stumbled on the situation, oblivious of the goings-on, was also gunned down. By the way, O'Rourke was Efik, not Igbo. Later that night, other officers of Igbo extraction in and around the garrison were identified and killed after a door-to-door siege. The killings quickly spread to Ibadan and Lagos. In Lagos, Captain Okoye, who was on transit at the Ikeja airport, was arrested and murdered. In Ibadan, hostile troops surrounded the State House, Agodi, where General Aguiyi-Ironsi and the state military governor, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Adekunle Fajuyi, and the commander of the 2nd Brigade, Lieutenant Colonel Hilary Njoku, were located. At dawn, hostile troops abducted Ironsi, Fajuyi, and Ironsi's Air Force ADC, Captain Andrew Nwankwo. Ironsi and Fajuyi were later murdered. However, Nwankwo managed to escape, and I have given full details of how he escaped in the video displayed here that I will also link in the description of this video. Meanwhile, the killings continued in Kaduna. The first victim was the commander of the Kaduna-based 3rd Battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Israel Okoro. His death in Kaduna was followed by that of the commander of the 2nd Re Squadron, Major Isong. In Kano, where the 5th Battalion was under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Mohammed Shua, the situation seemed initially under control until the troops mutinied, leading to the death of many Igbo civilians in Kano. From here, the situation got out of control. Apparently, what started as an attack on Igbo officers became an attack on Igbo civilians and officers alike. Unfortunately, the violence got out of control and spread to part of Bauchi, Sokoto, Katsina, and Zaria. Hundreds of Igbos died between Sunday, May 29 and Sunday, June 5, 1966. IBB said, the collapse of discipline within the military was so devastating that even northern officers had to be protected from rampaging northern non-commissioned officers. For instance, Lieutenant Colonel Joe Akahan's unruly junior officers shot him out of his barracks. There was a story, for example, of the Army's Provost Marshal, Major Ekanem, who was shot dead for no reason by Sergeant Lamdam on Qatar Bridge in Lagos while on an errand for Lieutenant Colonel Gowon. In August 1966, 5 Igbo prisoners detained at the 4th Battalion in Ibadan, Majors Chris Anufuru and Donatus Okafor, were murdered in prison by northern NCOs and junior officers. This is how IBB put it. In August 1966, a detachment of the 4th Battalion in Ibadan, consisting of NCOs and junior officers, raided the old Benin prison to release northern soldiers who had been held there since the January coup attempt. While inside the prison premises, they murdered 5 Igbo officers who were also detained in the same prison for their role in the January coup, including Major Chris Anuforo and Major Donatus Okafor. But what was Babangida's role in the coup? Unfortunately, his book, A Journey in Service, an autobiography, failed to explain the role he played in the counter-coup of July 1966. Meanwhile, the chaotic situation of indiscipline was widespread enough for unruly and devious officers to attempt to use the occasion to settle old scores with their superiors. This situation almost cost the life of the fine officer like Samuel Ogbemudia. So, what really happened? Prior to the counter-coup, Major Ogbemudia had detained Lieutenant Bukasuka Dimka for violating an order prohibiting illegal troop movement. However, after Dimka complained that he was an unfair victim of ethnic profiling, Ogbemudia released him from custody. Dimka, enraged by this provocation, devised a plot to assassinate Brigade Major Ogbemudia. Fortunately, Colonel Hassan Katsina and Major Abba Kazaya tipped Ogbemudia off and provided him with an escaped Land Rover equipped with a submachine gun. Meanwhile, as Dimka got wind of this, he marshaled a group of northern soldiers who then pursued Ogbemudia from Kaduna to Owo in Ondo State. They were shooting at him at intervals during the chase. At Owo, Ogbemudia abandoned his Land Rover when he ran out of fuel and was said to have scaled a 6-foot fence into a thick forest to escape Dimka's soldiers. According to IBB, it must have been an awful experience for a man like Ogbemudia, who would, after that scary experience, have an exemplary career in the Nigerian army. In Enugu, as was the case during the January coup attempt, the situation was calmer thanks to the prompt intervention of the commander of the 1st Battalion, Lieutenant Colonel David Ogunewe. Babangida would have this to say, quote, "Once he got knowledge of the killings in other parts of the country, Ogunewe quickly locked up the battalion's armory and placed it under the joint guard of northern and southern officers." End of quote. Those were really terrible times for Nigeria, IBB said. IBB continued. The killings, which started on May 29, peaked on September 29, 1966. According to official army records, no less than 213 predominantly Igbo officers and other ranks were killed during that period, and many civilians in different parts of the country also lost their lives. For Ibrahim Babangida, this period was undoubtedly a dark phase in our history as a nation. The first coup attempt, which led to the counter-coup, should never have occurred. The young idealistic officers bite off more than they could chew. IBB continued, "Without question, both events, the first coup and the counter-coup, deepened the distrust among ethnic groups in the country. Distrust that continues to plague us to this day. But even more fundamentally, those coups led to one of the bloodiest fratricidal conflicts in modern Africa, the 30-month Nigerian Civil War, with devastating consequences that we have never fully recovered from as a country. Click here for more on how Captain Andrew Nwankwo managed to escape when he was captured along with Ironsi and Faji by another non-commissioned officers in 1966, or here for the first part of this video. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Hispo Media if you have not done so already. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.